So when people are discussing like, oh, you shouldn't own the ETF. In fact, when someone tells you that the ETF is worse than self-custody, they are looking at it from one vertical. And if it's an American saying it, the question you should ask them is, are you willing to hand over your American citizenship? Because if you're not willing to hand over your American citizenship and you're against the ETF, you're an idiot. Because all of these extra services that are going to come out as a result of the ETF is undeniably brilliant compared to self-custody. If you're in a country where you've got political instability, where you've got financial market instability, and you may have to actually leave at some point, in the next 10 years, you may actually have to leave at some point and run, cut ties and run from your country, self-custody is the way to go. But even then, in that scenario, if you're, again, the nuanced argument, if you have the ability to invest in American capital markets, that's probably going to protect you if you have to cut and run from your host country, right? So there's that argument. Secondly, if you're someone who cannot get access to the financial markets in America, self-custody is your only solution. That's where you should go. Now, if you're someone who is living in America, living in the United Kingdom, living in Europe, no matter where you go in the world, you're underneath the umbrella of the United States of America. And that is going to come to get you at some point. Right? So really for me, here's the argument. And I think it's a sliding scale. I don't think that there's a definitive answer here. I think it's a sliding scale. On this side, you have self-custody. On this side, you have ETF. And you're going to end up somewhere on this scale of how much of each you should have. Here's some of the things and the advantages that are going to come with owning some of the ETF at some point. If, again, you are not part of those nuanced conversations of you're in a high political risk country, high financial capital markets risk country, et cetera, you are going at some point to be able to, like for example, right now, if you want to buy $10,000 of Bitcoin as a normal retail customer, your journey to go into Coinbase, right, that's going to cost you 3%. Just $300. $300 to buy Bitcoin from Coinbase at this point. On top of that, you now need to spend a couple $100, $200, $300 on buying a hardware wallet. You then need to go through all the risk parameters of that. You then need to go through the effort of that. And while that might be worth it, right, to some people, especially those in those type of countries that I've discussed, and by the way, this is Coinbase. This is the best. And even if you do it through, Coinbase Pro or whatever else you're doing, it's still 1%. Even those exchanges that tell you it's 1% list, what are they charging you on the spread? Right? You got to think about that. These companies are designed to make money, otherwise they'd be going broke, right? So they're going to charge you something for acquiring that Bitcoin. Whereas you want to go buy $10,000 worth of IBIT, for example, or FBTC or BITB or whatever else, it's at this point it's going to cost you what, $20 a year on that position. So using that Coinbase example of spending $300, right? Like it doesn't make sense. It's better, more cost effective. You're paying, $20 a year versus $300 up front for every $10,000 of Bitcoin. And then you got to pay a few $100s to protect the whole thing and then add the added risk of all of that self-custody risk. And again, this is not an argument for ETFs or self-custody. These are the same asset that has different risk parameters and analyses that you have to do. I have both, right? I have a mixture of both, but it's on a sliding scale. I do it based on what I think my life is going to turn into and what I'm going to need to use the asset for in the future. I am not sitting here saying, I need to run away from the world. I need to hand over my citizenship. I need to do all that. I know how the system works. I also have broker accounts. I also understand how to use leverage. I also understand these things. So I understand when there's a lot of people who believe that the system is just completely evil, and really it's people that have been wrecked by the system that believe it's completely evil. People that have benefited from the system, understand how to use the system, don't think it's evil. And ultimately, these ETFs, I mean, look, they've sucked up. Let me just bring it up right now, right? They've sucked up so much Bitcoin. It's shocking, right? BlackRock right now has 130,230 Bitcoin in the space of 34 trading sessions. Like the amount of arrogance that comes out of these people that say that the ETF is awful and you should just own self-custody Bitcoin and self-custody Bitcoin is real Bitcoin. You think all of those people that put $7 billion into BlackRock to own their Bitcoin are just stupid? The real conversation here is it's a sliding scale. What are you going to be building for your future? If you are going to be building something for your future that involves utilizing the system in some way, whether it's through debt, whether it's through utilizing call options. If you are planning on utilizing cash flow, let's say you want to generate cash flow on your Bitcoin, right? Let's look at one person who's got $1 million of Bitcoin, right? And he's pure and he's like a non-cucked Bitcoiner because all he does is self-custody with his cold wallet stuck up his anal, right? Let's look at that person over here with $1 million of Bitcoin versus someone else here who is like full ho gung ho on the, for the American capital market system, has 100% in the ETF. $1 million here, $1 million here. Okay, so now they want to utilize this asset to live on. This person has to sell down their Bitcoin. So they believe in Bitcoin so much that they now have to sell down their Bitcoin on a monthly basis to pay for their living expenses. This person who's a part of the system and a cuck and all this other stupid shit can write a call option against their Bitcoin ETF position and make $10,000 a month selling call options on there and keep his Bitcoin for his future children and his progeny. Who's smarter? If the goal is to keep Bitcoin for as long as possible, who's smarter here? This person that's like coming out here saying that that they believe in Bitcoin so much that real Bitcoin is non-ETF Bitcoin, etc., or this person who understands, utilizes the system, and then figures out, okay, I can just make $10,000 a month, pay for my living expenses, and still own my $1 million of Bitcoin, which will appreciate, obviously. At the end of the day, this person is going to end up with more Bitcoin than this person at the end of their life, and that's the goal here. The goal in a monetary network is to own as much of the asset as humanly possible. The goal is not to sell down the asset because your ideals don't allow you to see how to work within the system. Now, I understand, right? I understand that there's people here who are emotionally distraught. Maybe their parents have made some bad decisions and they've been through a situation where they just don't trust the system. They don't have a broker account. They're terrified of everything to do with the American financial system, etc., etc., etc. I get it, but I can't fucking help you with that, right? I can't help you with that. That is a personal problem that you have. But to turn around and say that the ETF is so much more terrible than self-custody Bitcoin is a moronic argument, especially for an American who is not willing to give up their American citizenship. So here's my question. You need to decide on this scale of self-custody to ETF where you land. There are some people who are 100% ETF, right? There's some people that are 100% self-custody. The question for you and I is really, where do we land on this scale? Is it 50-50, right? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Is it 30-70? Where do we land on this scale? And that's really the thing. And you've got to start thinking about the future that's being built. It's been 34 trading sessions since this ETF has been approved. And there's $7 billion in one fund. That's not stupid capital coming in. These ETFs are here to stay. They're here to drive these markets. There was a BlackRock presentation yesterday, and someone reported that their recommended allocation was 28%. There's $2.8 trillion coming in from BlackRock alone, if that's true, and if they execute that. So my point is this. The argument of self-custody or ETF is stupid. The first question you should ask to someone who says, you should self-custody everything, are you willing to give up your American citizenship? Because if they're not, well, the conversation's moot. I don't care where you run, right? It's not going to work. If somebody's talking 100% ETF, the question is, well, what's your exit plan in case things go wrong? What is your exit plan in case things go wrong? That's the question to ask someone who is 100% ETF. And all of us normal people that have money, that have been used to traditional assets, that have been used to, wanting to live in different places in the world, etc., but we are not afraid of American capital markets, we're going to be somewhere in this scale in the middle. But the actual conversation around self-custody versus ETFs is so stupid, it's unbelievable. It's coming from an ignorant, uneducated place. And I think that in order to move forward here, I definitely believe that there are most people that have self-custody Bitcoin need some allocation to the ETF. I don't know what percentage that is. That's a personal question for you. But I believe that over this next 10 years with this ETF arrival, it's going to be the same way as gold. The same thing happened in the gold market. And I wouldn't be surprised, right, if most of these people that are talking shit against the ETF are actually just paid by Bitcoin exchanges. Because why wouldn't you be shitting yourself? Why wouldn't I mobilize? If I own the Bitcoin exchange and I know that for someone spending $10,000, they need to spend $300 with me plus another $300 or $400 to get their cold wallets and all this other bullshit. Or they can just spend $20 a year owning IBIT, and regulatorily it's as secure, right? To some people, they perceive it as more secure than having self-custody. So that's the question here. Understand what the scale is for you. Understand what type of life you want. Don't stop getting sucked into the conversation from people that don't have broker accounts, from people that are in nuanced circumstances like a country that is just absolutely on the brink of absolute collapse. They need self-custody, 100%. I completely agree. But if you're living in America, you're living in the UK, you're living in Europe, you don't have any plans of handing over your British citizenship, your American citizenship, your European citizenship, in my opinion, you have to look at, and by the way, you own a sizable amount, right? Like, I'm not talking about people that just own one Bitcoin here. I'm talking about people that have a sizable amount, want to do things with their Bitcoin at some point in the future. The incentives that the financial markets are about to create for Bitcoin holders, and specifically ETF holders, is going to be absolutely ridiculous, and it's going to be phenomenal. Income, I'm talking about income generation, I'm talking about debt borrowing on your Bitcoin, I'm talking about leverage on your Bitcoin, I'm talking about all of these things that are going to come out on top of Bitcoin because of the ETF and the products that the ETF allows you or rather the products that the ETF can plug itself into. So ultimately, yes, this conversation does piss me off, because the majority of the time I'm having this conversation with people who, in essence, don't have a right to have an opinion on this, right? And I know that's going to trigger some people as well. But I come from the world where unless I proved certain results, the people, my mentors, didn't take my opinion seriously. So now you have people who don't have a broker account, have never had any experience in financial markets, telling you that the financial markets are completely trash, irrelevant, and your Bitcoin's going to get stolen from you, right? Everyone talks about the 6102 gold order that happened. Firstly, only 12%, I believe, of the gold was actually confiscated. Secondly, that order was ruled unconstitutional in the United States. Thirdly, the Supreme Court, the way it is right now, would strike down that order immediately. Fourthly, the capital markets in America would officially be over if that happened. Fifthly, the asset would have to be so significant in order for that to happen. We're not there yet. So everyone worried about that is ridiculous. You know how quickly you can get out of Bitcoin if you really get worried, and if you really think, oh my God, you know, America's just elected someone absolutely crazy and they've done this and done that. All you got to do is go in the market and click sell. You go and click sell, you move the cash, you buy the Bitcoin, you do whatever you need to do. But until then, I think it's just so irrational, the fear that there is around the ETF and all of the virtue signaling around self-custody. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people hating on me based on the comments in this video, but I hopefully, to those people who have capital, who are paying attention, who love their country, who are proud to be an American, proud to be a Brit, proud to be a European citizen, not living in, and all these other countries, by the way, that are pretty stable too, right? I hope you understand that the conversation isn't one or the other. It's a scale, and you have to decide where on the scale you land. But I'm telling you, someone who's an American citizen talking shit about the ETFs and saying self-custody is the only way, ask them, are you willing to hand over your American citizenship? And if not, shut the fuck up. It's just as simple as that. I believe this is going to be the dumbest comment for the next cycle, which is, why are you buying the ETF? Just buy real Bitcoin. I believe that's going to be the dumbest comment for the next cycle. I'm predicting that right now, and it's going to be from people that don't even have a broker account. Because ultimately, there are always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, you shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.